You get rejected so much that you just assume they're like these evil overlords, like some council of dark elders.
Welcome to the Film Riot podcast. I'm Ryan Conley, and today on the show we have my good friend Zach Lipovsky. He is a director that has, well, we're going to get into all the stuff that he has done, but recently he has done a feature for Disney with the Kim Possible live action film, and he just completed a film on his own. Him and his directing producing partner went off and made their own movie. They were tired of waiting around, so they went and made it happen themselves with a sizable budget and well-known actors. So I really wanted to dive into that, how he went about that, what his methodology for the whole thing was, because that is something that all of us can really grab onto and take the example of. And they have sold their film out in Tribeca. They went out, showed the film, and got it sold. So it was a very successful endeavor for him. And Zach has also made the app Shotlister, which we have talked a bunch about on Film Riot. So definitely jump over to filmriot.com/podcast, find the episode page for this episode, and find all of that, including a lot more details on Shotlister, which I love and use for every production. But before we get into that with Zach, I want to talk about MusicBed, who is not a sponsor for today. It's just something that I love, and I am an affiliate with them. So if you do use the link that we will have on the website, it does help us out, but you don't even have to use that link. Just go there and use it because it's awesome. MusicBed is a site that you can now get a subscription to, and either monthly or yearly. It's now monthly, which is great. So you could just get it for the time that you have a certain project you need it for, and then cancel that and just get it when you need to. But if you're somebody like me who is needing music on a weekly basis, you can get an even cheaper subscription at a yearly basis. And they're just one of the best out there, especially if you're doing stuff on YouTube or podcasts like this. How quickly they clear stuff if it's ever flagged on YouTube is just insane. Plus, they just launched a 30-day free trial, so you can go check that out, see if you even like it before you dive into the rest. Again, they're not a sponsor. I just really love them. So jump over to filmriot.com/podcast, find more info on that, or just go to musicbed.com and check it out. But now let's jump into it with Zach. All right, cool. So you've been traveling quite a bit, promoting two different projects.
I have, yeah. We have 2 movies coming out this year.
That's crazy. And one of them, which is, what I'm most interested in, is Freaks, which is one that you did by yourself, which is why I'm most interested in that.
Yeah, by ourselves. I directed it, wrote it, and produced it with my best friend, Adam Stein. And we really did it by ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dream, man. That's like what most of us, indie filmmakers are wanting to obtain. And you got the holy grail of
the lucky thing is film. That's the one thing they can do by themselves.
Yeah.
If that's the dream, go do it.
Yeah. And you took it out and you sold it. So it's going very well.
Yeah, I mean, the film was a response to, we've had luck to be able to be paid directors. We've had jobs as directors for hire on movies of, progressively bigger natures. But all the scripts we'd ever written or tried to make, or scripts that we found that someone had that we, worked on to try and build them up and hope that they would go, all of those just always fell apart, as the way that most movies do. You try and get this, and before you can get that, you need that, and before you can have that, you need this person, and to have that person, you need this, and you just try and you finally get that, but then you lose the other thing that you had, and most movies just kind of fall apart like that, and it was just so frustrating to us. So we just said, you know what, we just need to write a movie that we can make no matter what with what we have. And that became the movie Freaks.
Did you write with a budget in mind?
Yes, the budget in mind was 0. All of this was inspired by our Mark Duplass speech that he gave at South by Southwest that everyone should watch. And he describes, making Puffy Chair, which launched his career, and they had a van and a puffy chair. And him and his brother.
Yeah.
And so Adam and I went, okay, we've got a 5D, we've got you and I, we have your son, and his family owns a restaurant in LA. So we're like, so we have a restaurant, and we're like, we may get more money and we may get bigger resources in the future, but let's write a story that no matter what, we could still make it for 0, shooting with our own camera, with our own friends that would do it for free.
Yeah.
Just so that was always a possibility. There was never a possibility of, crap, we need another $2 million or we can't make the movie. Basically just promising ourselves we'd always be in a position where we were holding the keys to say, let's go make it. And then we were lucky as we started working on the movie and writing the script and people started asking what we were doing. Resources did start coming our way, and people that we had met along the way started supporting us, and some of them did it financially, and that started kind of growing the budget kind of piece by piece. And each time we told them, you will probably never get your money back. You will have absolutely no creative control. You are basically just supporting a film, not because it's a wise financial investment, but because you're going to have the front row seat to making a movie and getting to make a movie with us. And that's all we can promise, basically.
Yeah, those are very important points.
Yeah, this may be all the money we ever get. We're not raising to get to a certain amount. And, each amount kind of led to some more. And eventually we put some of our own money in also, which was important to other people because they felt like we had skin in the game. And we fully expected never to get that money back. It was just like buying a ticket to go to Willy Wonka's factory.
Yeah.
And eventually, we actually ended up raising a good amount of money. We ended up having just over $1 million.
Wow.
And we had, Bruce Dern, who's a 2-time Oscar-nominated actor, playing the role I was supposed to play. And Emil Hirsch, who's one of the most, super talented actors in the world, playing the role Adam was supposed to play.
And how did that come about, getting those names?
Well, basically, once we realized we weren't going to be acting in the movie, as we were sort of in the $500,000 range, we were like, well, we're not going to be acting in it. So it's usually basically pretty much every casting director costs $10,000 universally. So we spent $10,000 to hire a casting director. And basically you just start writing lists of, dream people, and these casting directors have relationships with all of the different agents and managers, and you basically start making offers. You start saying, hey, if this person, when you send them the script, you have to send it with the idea of what you would pay them. So you say, hey, if you were interested, we'd pay you this amount. And then usually they never get back to you. So you usually put an expiry on how long that offer is willing to last. And you just hope that you get someone's attention. I mean, that's the way of doing it that route. The better way of doing it, if you have it, is any kind of connection to anyone that you would want to be in your movie that's famous. So a person who knows a person who knows a person. As kind of awkward as that is and as hard as that is, that's actually a much more predictable method for getting to famous people. Even casting directors, it's just, big actors get those offers every day. So the chance that they'll read it is very low. But Bruce Dern was one of the first that said yes. Once we had him, then it makes it easier to get others.
Yeah, that's great. And did you find that pretty much across the board? Like once you had this, it was easier to get that? And was that a part of your strategy of let's go after this specific thing first and then this because that will give you ammo?
No, it wasn't really strategy. It was just because our strategy was we'll make it with whatever we have, but let's see if we can get that.
Yeah.
And once we had that, sometimes you go, oh, well, now that we have that, we might be able to get this. And if we didn't, it was okay, and we had backup plans. Like we ended up basically auditioning actors that were no names, that were friends of ours and people in Vancouver where I'm from, basically that would do the roles if we didn't get someone famous. So we basically could keep making offers and trying to get people right up to like the very last second. And that was the case. Emil is in the movie. He read the script, I think, a week and a half before we started shooting. Wow. And he was like shocked. He was like, wow, this script is amazing. Like, how is it that I'm reading it so close to when it's shooting? Like, how is everyone passed on this? This is like one of the best scripts I've read in like years. And we were like, well, we don't have a lot of money. And he was
Problem number one.
Yeah, he's like, I don't care. And he said this great line, which kind of made us like so excited. He said, you know what, guys? This movie's going to be so good. We're going to get people fired over this. All the actors that said no are going to fire their agents. That's how good this movie's going to be. And we're like, okay.
You're in.
That's great.
Yeah, that's such a great attitude.
But yeah, it was exciting.
I really love your approach of, the idea of we can make this for $0 and then you got a little bit and it was, okay, we can make it for this. And then it just kept ballooning from there.
Yeah, well, it wasn't our approach. It was Mark Duplass. He did a speech and he said, this is what you should do. And we were like, well, what we're trying isn't working, so let's try that.
You got it, Mark.
And it totally worked. The film has been doing incredibly well. It's got super high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been winning tons of awards in film festivals. And more importantly, we just got to make something that we were incredibly creatively just so proud of because it was something that we originated that, was the truest expression of our voice compared to all the other stuff that we had made. And having audiences see that was just overwhelming.
Do you have a wide release planned?
It's a theatrical release, which was really exciting, but it's medium to small. It's 50 screens. So it's sort of like the one cool art house theater in each major city.
Yeah.
But that's pretty exciting, you know.
Do you have a
Most
date for
theaters-
that yet?
Not an exact date. It'll be sometime sort of mid-year, like around the summer.
Oh, okay.
You know, they're always trying to figure out like what other movies are playing when, and you know where to place it so that you don't get lost in the shuffle.
Sure.
So we're kind of at that stage, but it'll be sort of in the middle of the year.
So you got the money and the cast and everything. How'd you pull together the crew? Was that just based off people you had worked with before?
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty challenging because we were shooting in Vancouver, which is where we've shot almost everything else. So we have really good relationships with crew, but the film stars an 8-year-old girl and she's in every scene of the movie. So we had to shoot it in the summer because during the summer, kids don't have to do schooling while they're on set. They still have restricted hours, but they don't have to do school. So you end up getting way more shooting time with them. And so we had to shoot it during the summer. But the problem is that's the busiest time of year to shoot in Vancouver. So all of the gear and all of the crews and everything was just like tapped out. Like we had grips that had never seen a C-stand before.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, we had friends that came out and, you know, I've done this in the past when I've done low budget stuff where we basically had like really good department heads, people that were either friends of ours that had worked on huge stuff and just wanted to help out, or just really solid indie department heads, and then kind of people that need training below them
Yeah.
that have lots of enthusiasm. The other thing we did, which was, I don't know if it was unique, but it was just sort of our approach, was we couldn't pay very much. So we paid every single person on the crew the same amount per day, no matter what their job was. So for PAs and stuff, they ended up making a little bit more than they're used to making, but it just felt like sort of the right, it was a small crew, it was like 30 people, maybe 35 people. And everyone was just kind of doing everything. So we just kind of figured, you know, it didn't make sense to pay someone 3 times as much as someone else when everyone's going to be working for less than they're worth. So
Yeah.
we just sort of paid everyone the same amount, and that's the way we did it, you know, because it was mostly non-union. So
That's great. So did you deal with some unions on that? I mean, I assume SAG was a part of it.
SAG was part of it, and there's a Canadian acting union that was a part of it as well. And then I'm in the directors union, so the DGC, which is the Directors Guild of Canada. So that was involved. And then we also had the camera union because the DP and sort of the camera people I knew really, really well were all in the union. So it made sense to use them. So those are the ones we did. But they all, you know, they all have agreements for lower end production, and most of them, you know, if you reach out to them and kind of explain your position, you can even negotiate your own rates, saying that, you know, this is basically a special case. You know, we were basically, Vancouver is one of the biggest places in the world for shooting. I think at the time there was 75 film crews shooting, and so we were the smallest one in the city. So we were paying the least amount. So anyone could go to any other show and make twice as much money. So it had to be people that were there for the right reasons.
Yeah. And when you say negotiate the rate, you had to negotiate your own rate down because you're in the union?
Well, I just did it for free. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything you have to, any hoops you have to go through to be able to do it for free when you're in the union, even though it's your film?
Yeah, I basically had to pay myself what the union says I have to get paid, which wasn't very much. It's sort of their minimum. And then I just invested that money back into the film. It's basically called a check swap. It's kind of like, it's sort of understood that that's something you can do at low budgets, is basically pay it to myself and then pay it back. The only thing that you lose there is some of the dues and stuff that you use, you know, when you pay a union person.
Yeah.
But in general, that's a way of kind of getting around the rules without breaking them.
And how many days did you shoot on this?
We ended up shooting basically for 4 weeks, so it was 20 days, 4 5-day weeks.
Is it like more of like a one location thing, or there is a lot of locations?
That's a very interesting question because
it sounds like a question that might give things away.
Yeah, that is a big spoiler to some degree. It definitely starts as a movie you think will only be in a few rooms.
Gotcha.
But that is not how it ends up happening, but not in the way that you would think. But yes, it's, you know, it's an indie film. We wrote it to be able to have a few limited locations, but we wrote it knowing that we didn't want it to feel like it had a few limited locations, because sometimes I feel like indie movies, when they start and you kind of realize, oh boy, this is going to be one of those indie movies that's trapped in a house. And you kind of go, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie starts, and people have that reaction at the beginning. And then as things kind of unravel and open and fold, they start going, oh, okay, it's not what I was expecting. So that was kind of part of the fun of it. was playing into that expectation.
Did you have a lot of, because I know you are very familiar with visual effects, did you have a lot of that in there? Did you try to steer clear of that because of the budget?
Yeah, I mean, there's about 200 visual effects shots in the movie, which I would say isn't a lot. It's, Kim Possible has 800 or 900. So, Lord of the Rings has 1,500 per film. So
There's a couple.
it's on the lower end, but it's not nothing. All the visual effects that we did, most of them were done by myself or by vendors, like, visual effects houses that we've worked with that were happy to do kind of 3 or 4 of the really big shots. Basically, like, the way we always kind of split it up is, like, there's a lot of stuff that just, like, one person can do. And usually that's simple compositing type stuff. And then there's sort of an area of visual effects where it takes basically a team of people, unless you have all those skills individually. And that's usually CG related stuff or like super duper heavy simulation type stuff.
Yeah.
And those are the type of things that we gave to visual effects houses. And in return, either they worked on deferral or they worked on points. So basically we didn't spend any money up front. But we basically said, if we make money, we'll pay you what it's worth, or you can participate in the profit of if there is any. And one house actually called Atmosphere, they did all of like the Battlestar visual effects and stuff. They ended up giving their points back because they were just like, you know what, it's just, we did this to support you and to support indie film. And, for them, they're working on $1 million budgets of visual effects. It wasn't a lot of money. So they ended up just saying, you guys keep it, you deserve it.
That's amazing.
But, the reason we had those relationships was because I've had other movies that I've done that did have budgets and, we worked with them on those. So they're being smart. They're trying to preserve a creative working relationship. And they also, the funny thing about some of those companies is a lot of them used to be indie filmmakers or indie producers who wanted to make an indie movie and their dream of that took them down a different path, and now they're running a visual effects house. A lot of them are filmmakers at heart, so we played to that.
Yeah. And is working with these VFX houses any different on the large budget films versus something like this?
Not really. The only difference is there's less opinions. There's basically, Adam and I we're the producers and the writers and the directors, so as long as the two of us agreed.
I imagine that was pretty freeing.
Yeah, that was the really fun part of it. But also, we really, 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 really cared about this one.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't care about other movies, but like we really cared about this one. It was our super baby. So everything had to be perfect. So I'm sure we kind of pushed them to the point where they probably would have charged other people more money, but they were just like, okay, so there's that side to it. But, you have to be aware of people are doing it basically for free. And it is costing them money. They're paying people to do it. So
yeah. And I mean, you've done quite a few films now, and you did this indie, you did it completely on your own. And then, the other one that you have coming out is for Disney, no small company. Yeah. It's kind of large.
Which was super high budget.
Yeah.
Super, big schedule and tons of toys. It was the exact opposite.
Did you like one process more than the other, or were they just different for you? I mean, one is based on a pre-existing franchise, so I'm sure there was
Yeah, I mean, they're basically
more
opposite in every single way.
Yeah. Yeah.
One is an indie movie that probably no one will ever see when you start it, that you are creating and you're just hoping one day you might even make it. The other is a massive franchise with millions and millions of fans in hundreds of countries all around the world that, we have a lot of resources and talented people and opinions surrounding. And on Kim Possible, we were just the directors, basically. We didn't have to do all crafty. We didn't have to do payroll. We didn't have to do every different little bit of it. So it was a different experience. But, in the end, the directing part of it is basically the same.
Yeah.
The only thing that really changes is, to some degree, it's the competency of everyone you're working with goes way, way up. And that's the exciting part, is you no longer have to worry about like people accomplishing what it is you're hoping to accomplish, because they're just working at such a high level. Like we had the props master of Star Trek, So like when
No
we're
big
like
deal.
talking about let's build a blah blah blah, I'm like, this is the guy. He's built like phasers and like tricorders and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he can handle this. But there's much bigger stakes and there's much bigger personalities and there's much bigger fear because of how much more is at stake. So sort of the directing worry of like, are we going to be able to pull this off kind of goes away. And then there's a lot more sort of like diplomacy and kind of working with others and working with bigger personalities that kind of comes into play. And so it's kind of a trade-off that way.
Do you prefer one process over the other?
I've always tell everyone you have to do both. You have to do the ones that you're creating yourself, and you have to do the ones that you do for hire, because I've seen a lot of my friends do one or the other, and they always seem to end up unhappy. The people who are just like diehard, only do the stuff that they're doing, generating themselves, generally they get into rough patches, probably financially. They don't have a lot of money to keep themselves going, or they can't get the project going, and they're just like, it's just their one thing that they're just like totally like pushing, and they just have no way of making it happen. And I have other friends who've just basically only ever done work for hire, but they kind of end up a little creatively underwhelmed, even though they're working and they're directing, which is fun. It's not necessarily their voice, so they end up feeling a bit empty. But both really help each other. You know, taking a job for directing for hire tells the world you're a director, and you meet the type of people that will help you make your passion project. You know, a lot of those people came onto Freaks. Like, we did a series called Mech X4 with Disney, and it got canceled right before we made Freaks, and we just stole all the props and all the wardrobe and all the like, all the sets and like some of the like picture vehicles. We just used them all in Freaks because, you know, our TV show had just been canceled, and the production company was happy to let us have them. So that made making Freaks way easier, even though it was a lower budget thing. And having made Freaks and having wrote it and shown the world that we're kind of creators, not just directors, the types of jobs that people are now bringing to us for hire have a much higher degree of us being involved creatively from the beginning, because we've kind of shown that we could on a movie that we didn't ask for permission for, but it's kind of shown people that we can do that. And so for the first time, you know, there's projects that are kind of circulating, and we're like, well, we'll write and direct it. And they're like, oh, okay, great. They're not questioning, can you do that?
Yeah.
And no one approved us to write Freaks. It's not like some executive was like, you're allowed to write now. We just wrote it and showed that we could. And now people just don't even question that we can. So I think for happiness and financial reasons, everyone should do both. But then also they start helping each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just creating that sort of demo for yourself to open up those other doors definitely seems like.
And there's always ebbs and flows. Like, you'll be doing a lot of for hire work and it'll dry up for some reason. And that's the perfect time to work on your passion project. And then just as you're getting ready to do your passion project, you'll get a job for somebody else. And then you'll do that, get some money in your pocket, and then you'll do your passion project that's ready to go. And you just, you know, I believe in ping-ponging back and forth. That isn't what Mark Duplass says to do. He says to basically just always do your passion project and always do it for less money than you think you should be doing it for, which I think is a valid way to go. But that's not the path that I've done.
Yeah, and with going back to Freaks, with Freaks, you ended up selling it at, was it TIFF that you sold it at?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to get into TIFF, and we're lucky because that's a big market where people sell movies.
Yeah.
You know, the other ones are like Sundance and South by Southwest and places like Berlin and Cannes. And we had actually got rejected by some of those festivals, but we never announced the movie, so no one knew that we'd been rejected by them. So it seemed like we just applied to TIFF and got in. But there was kind of two big things that helped us get into TIFF. One was that we showed the movie to, one of the things that you need when you're selling a movie is a sales agent, and they're kind of like a real estate agent for movies. They're a middleman who knows all the people that buy movies, and they sell the movie and they take 10%. And there's so many of them, and anyone can basically call themselves a sales agent. So it's really hard to know who to trust, and a lot of them are untrustworthy. But we were lucky enough to get hooked up with CAA, which is one of the best, and they really believed in the movie, which was very lucky of ours. So just being with them added a lot of oomph, because CAA goes to Toronto with like 20 or 30 movies. But even they weren't sure if we'd get in or not. And the other thing that we did was we just reached out to the programmers and said, hey, we've got this, like, I found out of a filmmaker I knew that had been in Toronto and said, hey, how did you get in? He said, man, the programmers are so nice. They're so approachable. Here's their email. Just reach out to them. Which was like, I always imagine programmers as these evil gatekeepers that are faceless, that just reject every movie that comes to them and hate filmmakers. Because that's just sort of the image that you get rejected so much that you just assume they're like these evil overlords, like some council of dark elders. So I just emailed them, and he got back to me within an hour and was like, hey, it sounds like a really cool project. You know, I'm actually going to be in Vancouver. Can we set up a screening? I was like, okay. Yeah, okay, sure.
I got time.
And then, and then eventually they programmed the movie, and I got to know them, and they're just, of course these people are massive film lovers. Their job is to watch like 400 movies a year. You know, like they have to be huge film lovers to
Yeah.
do that. And they love discovering talent and promoting it. Obviously, they see a lot of movies that they don't like, but they are very approachable film lovers. And that was kind of a big shock to me. And ended up developing a great relationship when I was at the festival, thinking sort of, this is going to be very valuable to have this relationship with a TIFF programmer. But also because they were genuine fans of our movie. They were basically the first fans because they saw it before anyone else. And every film festival I've gone to since, that's been the case. And that had a huge impact on getting in. So I think even if you don't have CAA, just reaching out personally to them, and especially if you know anyone who they've programmed before, because that's someone they've already chosen as someone they like. And you can say in your email, hey, so-and-so was in your festival and they really recommended it. They said it was great and they gave me your info because I think you might like my movie. It's always a great way of emailing.
Yeah, definitely. And did your sales agents handle everything after that? Like once you were in TIFF, and I don't even know how that works. Is it someone bids on your movie, or you know what I mean? Is there some kind of movie auction that goes down?
Yeah, it's different for every movie, and it's definitely not a hands-off experience. You are very much involved, and you have to be involved to make sure that you're a priority of theirs because they have many other movies there. You have to be involved to make sure that you think they're positioning it in the right way. It's like having a real estate agent or having an agent. And basically the way that it works, I'll try and be brief because it's quite a complicated thing, but the basic way it works is your movie has a premiere date. The first thing is to try and get a good premiere date. Usually it's near the beginning of the festival. For TIFF in particular, it's during the first weekend because basically all the industry people leave after the first weekend. So if you premiere after that point, you're probably not going to get sold. And so doing whatever you can to get a good date, and that's involving the programmers and your sales agent and just trying to get a good time slot, which we did. The next thing is you want to try and get press, but you don't want any of the press to come out before the premiere. Basically protecting in case all the press is bad, because you don't want a bunch of bad press to come out before your premiere because then no one will go and no one will buy your movie. So we did press screenings. We hired a publicist and we did press screenings in LA and New York. And the publicist had relationships with film reviewers and invited them to see the movie. And they write reviews and you have no idea what the reviews are. And then our movie, screened at 8 p.m. and it was done at 10 p.m. and all the reviews came out at 10 p.m. It's like like those movies you see when they're on Broadway and they're reading the newspapers of the play that they just did. And thankfully, most of the reviews were positive, and that helps. And then the next day we were like, so, what's it going to be like? Do you have anyone bidding yet? And our agents were like, it's going to be, it's a myth that it's like this midnight bidding war that doesn't really happen. It might even take a week or two. Like, people are going to slowly get back to us. Just relax. Like, it's not a bad sign. Things are going well. We've had interest, but it's, it's not going to be this massive thing. And then 3 hours later, he's like, can you be at this hotel in 15 minutes? It's going down. it was like, oh, okay.
It's like a film drug deal.
Yeah. And we went to this hotel and we ended up meeting the company that ended up buying it and meeting everyone who worked at the company, and they were incredibly passionate about it. And it's a smaller company. It's kind of a scrappy company. They're in Texas. I don't know if you know them.
Who is it?
They're called Welgo.
Okay.
And they're a small distributor, but they were incredibly passionate about the movie, and financially they were really willing to get behind it in a meaningful way. And they're hoping to grow their business in the same way we were hoping to grow our career. So it ended up being a really good match. And they really creatively got the movie. It's a very complex movie to kind of figure out how you're going to position it tonally, because it really relies on mystery. But they totally got it, and they were excited, and we were excited. And so they had to be on a plane at 5 a.m., and we closed the deal at 3 a.m. in a hotel lobby.
Man, that's crazy.
And that was it.
That's amazing. Congrats again on that. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
You're living the indie dream.
It's pretty crazy thinking back. I remember when we called you when we were writing just the very beginning of the first script.
Yeah.
Just to tell you about it and see if there was something we could do together or something. And just thinking back to everything that's happened since then is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is. So yeah, that's been a very rewarding thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And everyone should check it out. It's a pretty amazing movie. It's very special, but try and read nothing about the movie if you can going in. Most reviews keep away from spoilers because they had such an experience watching it, not knowing anything, but definitely go in blind if you can.
That's what I've been trying to do, is just not even ask you any questions. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I just want to see it.
Yeah.
But, we've talked about all the current stuff. We talked about how you sold your film, which is amazing. You're doing some massive franchise work as well. But just going way back to how you even got your start, what started you off in all this? I mean, I know I'm pretty sure you were like me, whereas you've wanted to do this since you were a kid, and then it was just heading that way with the same sort of, making movies with your friends, I assume. But what would you say was your intro into the professional world of all of this?
Yeah, I kind of had a fairly unique intro in a few ways. One, my mom was a TV producer for like kids TV, like super low budget kids TV. And so she, instead of babysitting, she just cast me as an actor in her shows. Single mom. So I just started acting when I was like 5, and it ended up getting an agent when I was 7. And I just kind of grew up on film sets. I wasn't even that interested in acting. It was just the one way of being on a film set when you're a kid. And I would sleep under the edit bays when she was editing, and whenever daycare ended at 6, so if she had to work past that, I was there next to her, and just kind of grew up on film sets. But at the age I was 10, I kind of grew up just as sort of computers were just starting to be able to do interesting things. I started doing animation when I was 10 because that's basically the only thing that computers could do. They couldn't really handle video yet. And then by the time I was kind of in my last few years of high school, Final Cut Pro came out, and mini DV tapes came out, and like the ability to kind of shoot digital video and edit digital video just kind of happened, and started making as many films as I could with my friends, and started just after high school going to networking things and meeting other indie filmmakers and just helping on every indie film I could, every short film I could. I probably was involved in 20 or 30, fast filmmaking competitions where you make a movie in 24 hours or 48 hours.
Yeah.
And through those, you meet so many people. And it's a great way of like beta testing if they're idiots or jerks or not, because when in the stress of making a movie in 24 hours, like you realize who the good people are pretty quick.
Yeah.
And those are all like my lifelong friends still. And, and eventually I was in this competition that Vancouver has for making short films, kind of spotlighting directors each year. And I made a short film in that won that festival. And then a year or so later, there was this competition that Steven Spielberg was doing that was sort of like American Idol, but for film, where you had to make a film every week. And I submitted that short I had made in that first competition, and that got me to round 1. And there was like 200 rounds to get through to get onto the competition of all sorts of different things, including making movies and drug tests and psychological evaluations and interviews and like everything you can imagine. But they narrowed it down from 12,000 filmmakers to 50. And I was one of the few, there's probably 10 of us or 15 of us that were not from the US. And by the top 20, I was the only non-American. And, made a movie every week in front of 10 million people. And that was an amazing experience, basically having to write a movie that in 5 days, 10 million people would vote on whether you're going to stay or leave. And then find out on the 6th day and start writing the next one.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, I was one of the people watching that, actually.
Yeah.
I loved that show.
Yeah, that was a crazy experience. And that was my first break into LA, for anyone who, it's the same thing as Canadians as someone who grows up in Nebraska or something. Like, eventually you kind of have to get to LA.
Yeah.
And you're in competition with all the other people that are trying to make it in LA. But at least I had that as a great kind of kickoff, because a lot of people in LA had watched that and knew my short films, and it seemed like basically it was going to be easy. It was like I had people saying, "Oh man, in 6 months," like industry people, "in 6 months you'll be directing a $60 million movie." And basically what happened was the writing strike happened in 2007, and that shut down Hollywood. And then when the writer's strike was over, there was a massive recession in 2008 that basically shut down Hollywood, and I didn't work for like 4 years.
Man, that's some terrible timing.
So, yeah. But, it taught me a huge amount. And during those 4 years, I looked at them as like total failure and agony and depression. Because I was still working. I was writing scripts and developing things and doing meetings and eking out a little bit of money here and there, doing commercials and music videos and whatever I could.
Yeah.
And it all felt like failure at the time. But what became evident later was I was actually learning a massive amount, so that when opportunity did start to come my way again, I was so much more prepared for it to be able to capitalize on it and not screw it up. Like if those opportunities had come 4 years earlier, I probably would have screwed them up.
Yeah.
Which you see all the time with people that get their first break and they're not prepared. And it's just the wisdom of like, having made mistakes and knowing not to make them again. But luckily having made them on smaller things instead of on your big break.
Is there anything that just comes to mind that's, one of those things that you learned that really helped you be prepared for those bigger projects?
I mean, there's hundreds of things, most
it's a
of them
tough
very
question,
small.
I know.
I'm trying to think of anything specific, but I really developed my sense of story because I wrote like a whole bunch of scripts. So, you got to do your 10,000 hours of writing stories, because the first draft of every script is terrible, but definitely the first draft of your first script is terrible.
Yeah.
And so I always love, there's like a CalArts quote where they say, CalArts is like, the animation studio that's in California that's quite famous. And they say when you first arrive, okay, you've got 10,000 really shitty drawings inside of you and we need to get them out. So start drawing. And I love that idea of like, there's a really super talented person inside of you. And it's not necessarily talent, because like there's a great quote, I think it's from Ira Glass, or not Ira Glass. I think it is Ira Glass. And he talks a lot about when he started. Now he's basically Mr. Radio. But when he started, he says, when you start out, you have taste, but you don't have the talent yet. Like, you know what a good movie is, but you don't know how to do it yet. And so what's really frustrating is you make a movie and it's shitty. Even though you know what a good movie is, you just don't know how to do it yet, because you've got to make all those mistakes and learn all of the wisdom and just kind of continuously fail upwards to get there. There's no other way of doing it. You can't just be told how to do it. You just have to do it. And, that's true of the software industry too. I mean, there's a big thing in the software industry, which I'm involved with my app Shotlister. And I've done a lot of research learning about software. And there's this whole new movement called agile development. And basically what it is instead of spending a year making the perfect app, launch an app in 2 weeks that's barely working and learn all of the problems, and you'll be surprised by the things you learn. Like, the assumptions you make at the beginning will be completely wrong. And if you spend a year making something on those assumptions, you'll have made the wrong program. Whereas if you make a really early one that's really rough, you'll learn things from your users immediately.
Yeah.
And you can kind of continuously fail and change and be very agile. That's why it's called that. And it's kind of similar with your film career. You kind of have to like fail early and fail quickly and fail continuously.
Yeah, man.
And you just kind of, the problem with asking people how they started is every single person will tell you a different story.
Exactly. And
it's totally based on when they came up. No one else is going to go on to a reality show with 10 million people on it that goes into a writing strike and a recession.
Exactly.
No one else is going to sneak onto Universal Studios and get an office like Spielberg did when he was 20. And then suddenly, have the head of the studio say, "Hey, kid, you're pretty good."
Yeah. That's
so
what I love about all those origin stories, and where I think they're valuable is there is no one that's the same. And it kind of, once you're hearing all those, it kind of strips away the thinking that I'm doing it wrong or I need to go
I always
do
think
this exactly. It's like, it's going to be different for every single person.
Yeah, I think a really destructive concept that seems to be universal is this idea of breaking in.
Yes.
Which is kind of this idea that like there's this giant wall, and once you break through that wall, there's just this beautiful garden of eternal bliss on the other side of just like total creative freedom and tons of money. And the truth of the matter is there is a big wall that you have to like figure out some way, but you will find some way. You'll find a crack that no one else has found. And as soon as you slip through that crack, it'll seal behind you and everyone will run to where it was and it'll already be gone. And you'll find another even bigger wall on the other side of that wall.
Yeah.
and the walls just keep getting bigger and the cracks just keep getting smaller. And you get to play with bigger toys and you start being able to get paid, but the struggle of trying to make stuff never goes away, and it doesn't even go away for the big people, I heard this interview with Guillermo del Toro, and he said, filmmaking's like a shit sandwich. You have to eat all the shit before you get to the crust. And I was like, you're Guillermo del Toro. How could that possibly? And then I was like, wait a minute. Like, and I started meeting some of my idols and meeting very experienced directors when I was like shadowing directors. And you just realize like that feeling you're having right now of like struggling and how do I get this made? Like, that's what you're signing up for the rest of your life. That is what it is to be a filmmaker. that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And that was a really big lesson for me that brought so much happiness once I realized it. It was actually my dad who was the one who told me. He was like, if you spend 90% of your life saying, I'm only going to be happy when this happens, even when you finally achieve that thing, you're going to be happy for 10 minutes. And then you're going to say, I'm only going to be happy now when this happens. And you're going to end up having spent most of your life unhappy just because you hadn't achieved something. And now that's like super easy for me to say because, I have money in my bank account and I am directing things. But the moment that I sort of started really enjoying the process, no matter what the process was, like making sure, I'm going to write this script and even if the script never gets made, I'm going to make sure I enjoy the process of writing it and learn from whatever I can from writing it, because that will mean that it was worthwhile doing, because that's the only part of the process I can control. And once I started doing that, I started having success. That may be a coincidence. It may be that I just ended up being happy because I started having successes, but it felt like the moment I was able to kind of recognize that the process is the part that you need to make sure is making you happy, not the outcome. That was kind of the moment that things started happening. And it's very difficult to do when things are not going right.
Yeah.
But it's something to try and strive for.
Yeah, man, that's great. And just a soup full, that's wisdom soup, I think, is what we just got just there. I don't think we're going to get any better than that. So I'm just going to say, thanks, man. This has been great. Really appreciate you taking the time. And congrats again on all the success. And I cannot wait to see Freaks.
Yeah, it's pretty special. And people should check out Freaks. They should check out Kim Possible, which is going to be on Disney in February. And,
is it February? What was the date exactly?
It's going to be February 15th.
February 15th.
If you have an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, or if you were a 10-year-old 10 years ago, I think you will probably think the movie's pretty awesome. And people should check out Shotlister, which is that app I have, which is really powerful.
Oh, man.
Really,
I
really
use
useful,
that on every project. And I think I talk about it on every project on Film Riot as well. It's just, God, it's such a, especially when we just did Ballistic and everything, when we did the Texas side of it, it was kind of like, it was crazy last minute stuff all over the place. So I just had it on.
Especially, when things start getting complicated, it's very helpful.
Oh man, so much. We had to shave pretty much a day of a 3-day shoot.
And you have to move everything around.
Yeah. So I'm just doing things on the fly. Right. Yeah. And then just being able to like shoot that out to, everybody else's accounts who are with you, and they just have it immediately so they can see at least where my brain's at as I'm like shifting things quickly. It's killer. But we'll add links to all of the above on
shotlister.com. Check it out.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
And that's it for today. Again, big thank you to Zach. Go to filmriot.com/podcast to find out more information about his projects and Shotlister. Again, I can't recommend Shotlister enough. I use it on all of my projects. We talked about it a ton on Film Riot. It's just an app that will let you schedule out your days, figure out your shot list, move things around as you go, and it can connect to all the people who need to be connected to it on set with you. So as you're making changes, you can push it to them. It is really a must-have for me with any project. So definitely check that out. And of course, you can find me online at twitter.com/Ryan_Conley. Jump over to iTunes and leave a review. That stuff really helps us out. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.